I'm Clifford Base, and welcome once again to our next section of reading Machiavelli's Prince, where we are looking today at chapter 9 about the civic principle. So, what is about the civic principle? Well, this continues something that was started last chapter, which was the two things that cannot be attributed to virtue or fortune, right? That therefore he dealt with wickedness, which is neither virtue or fortune. Now he's going to talk about the second thing that he mentions at that chapter, that first paragraph, that someone who attains the principate through citizens, the favor of citizens. Now it says, but coming to the other part, when a private citizen, neither by wickedness nor intolerable violence, but with the favor of his fellow citizens, becomes prince of his fatherland, which one can call a civic principate, nor is it necessary to attain it either wholly through virtue or wholly through fortune, but merely through a fortunate astuteness, a fortunate astuteness. In other words, it doesn't come through virtue or for fortune, but through a fortunate astute, something you're astute. In other words, you're some they like you, that therefore their favor is fortune, but it's because of your character and who you are. You something about you. So it's combined. It's not wholly. In other words, it's necessary to attain it either. In other words, not necessary to wholly through virtue or through virtue or through fortune, but through a fortunate astuteness. I say that one ascends to this principate either with the favor of the people or with that of the great. So therefore, two ways you get into this principle: that of the people or the great. You get into this print, you become the leader. This is here you becoming the leaders of the society. They will either favor you through the people or the great. In other words, for in every city these two humors are to be found. And it comes of this that people desire not, okay. In other words, these humors are found in every city, okay. In every city, these two different humors are to be found. Now, this echoes Aristotle's book 4, Aristotle's Politics, book 4, where he talks about in chapter 1 and chapter 2, I think, more correctly. He talks about the two, this weird, what Machiavelli calls humors. He calls them the two spirits, two things. There's this, and the few and the many. The few or the great, the opulence, the people who are leading, the nobles, the great, the nobles. Aristotle speaks of the nobles, the notables, the nobles, and then the great, Machiavelli calls them, and then the people, the many, right? So therefore, they are founded by these two humors. The people or the great, right? Everything is found that are to be found. And when it comes to this, that the people desire not to be commanded or oppressed by the great, and the great desire to command and to oppress the people. And from these two different appetites come three effects into the city: either a principate, liberty, or license. There are these three effects. In other words, the great wants to command. The great wants you to command. The great wants to command. The great wants to command and oppress the people. The people want to only be not oppressed by the people. So therefore, these two humors in the city, the people and the great. The people just want to be left alone. The great want to do great things, and to do those great things, they need to force the people to do them, right? Or to command the people and to coerce them. And from these three effects happen. He says from these two different appetites, these humors, right? Humors or appetites. One of three effects arises: either a principate, liberty, the people get their way, or license, which is the great get. But maybe the question is, what is license? What is liberty? Liberty would be one view of liberty would see the people getting their way. Another view of liberty could be that the nobles, virtue, doing all those great deeds, do their way. Okay, so what is liberty and what is license here is not clearly. It's we're left to this. License is people getting their people being left to do what they want, not to be getting being left alone, or or is license the great doing what they want. Okay, so this is in many ways this flips it, because in the traditional argument is that the many live by desire, and because they live by desire, this is license, right? Therefore, this is what the traditional argument against the many rule always was. The many, given that they were not, and whereas the great, who achieve great things, are lived by virtue, and therefore, in other words, this was the classic argument. Machiavelli says, no, 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 no. Both are driven by desires and passions and appetites. The difference is the appetite of the many is to be left alone, to enjoy their little small things. Whereas the appetite of the great is to achieve great things, and therefore that requires them to command. In other words, this is therefore this is what the difference in that sense is. So, therefore, the question of liberty and license here becomes a very problematic one, because what is what? The principate is the ruler of the prince, or the prince rules. The prince rules. So the prince becomes what? The prince becomes the middle position against liberty and license, right? The principate is established either by the people or by the great, according to whether one or the other of these parties has the occasion. In other words, a principate is established by the people, or by what? They will have the occasion. That either one of these parties will have an occasion. For the great, when they see they are not able to resist the people, begin turning to the reputation of one of their own, making him a prince, so that they, under his shadow, give vent to their appetite. So therefore, this is that. The perception here is that. But again, this is the argument. Is Machiavelli kind of takes the argument that isn't that the demagogue, man? Didn't Greeks and Aristotle and Greeks say this is the demagogue? So what is normally attributed in the ancients as being the behavior of the people, who used the ruler as the prince, or the the demagogue as a instrument to what? To give vent to their appetite. Machiavelli flips it and says it's the great who uses that in that sense. There's a kind of flipping here. Um, the people also, when they see they are not able to resist the great, turn the reputation of one and make him a prince in order to be defended with his authority. So the people, the great, turn to the prince, somebody take to a reputation of someone important, one of their own, to that has authority, in order that they will use his authority, that they can give vent to their appetites. Whereas the people, turn to the prince because they can't resist the great as a reputation of one, to make them as to defend them against the great, right? Here he flips. In other words, this is what we, in many ways, Machiavelli flips the account of demagogues in many the traditional account, right? The traditional account of this. He who comes to the Principate with the aid of the great maintains himself with more difficulty than the one who attains it with the aid of the people. So therefore, in other words, the one who comes to the prince, the aid of the great, is more difficult than the one who attains it to the people. For he finds himself prince with many around him who opine themselves as equal. And because of this, he cannot command or manage them in his own mode. In other words, the problem of coming through the power of the great is they think they made him. They think they're his equal. And he cannot command them or manage them in the way he wants, his mode. In other words, they view themselves as equal and he can't command them. But he who arrives at the Principate with the popular favor finds himself alone. And there will be no one or very few around him who are not prepared to obey. That's a missing period here. There's a missing period here in the text. Okay, and to obey. Besides this, so therefore the people will come in there because they want a defender, and they will obey because there's no one. They among themselves they don't see anyone. They're equal. Besides this, one cannot with honesty satisfy the great without injuring others. But one can well do that with the people. In other words, here's footnote 1. This is the classic note for the civic principle. The nature of the people and that of the many. This is the difference on the natures of the people. You can go check out Discourse 1, Discourses 1, first discourses, the second of the discourses, and chapters, particularly chapters 27 and 30 of discourses 3, chapter 6, 12, 19 to 23, 18 to 31, right? This is the famous, and then so these are the virtues of the people and the many, right? The nuance, the nature of the people, that is the many, right? This is the classic argument. What is the virtue of the many? What is the virtue of this? In other words, one cannot honestly satisfy the great without injuring others, but one can well do that with people. For the end of the people is more honest than that of the great. The latter wanting to oppress, the former not to be oppressed, right? That's the end. People just want to be left alone. The people just want to be left. The nature of the great is to do great things and therefore to oppress. Therefore, Machiavelli is very interesting. Machiavelli does really flip the ancient script here. He flips the ancient script. And he turns this ambition of virtue, those who wish to do virtuous great things, to achieve this, to live this virtuous life, to achieve this thing, actually use they're oppressive, they're vicious in that sense. They become vicious. They're injuring others. They satisfy the great without injuring others. But you can well do that to people. People don't require you to injure others in the same way. That was the opposite argument of the ancients. The ancients argued that the people, many will want you to harm the great, the wealthy. You steal the wealthy, take the wealthy's goods, confiscate the wealthy to give it to the poor. Right? That's the classic argument of the against the classic argument against democracy, against the many. Right? The many will use their power to take from the few, and the few fears themselves, and they're acting in self-defense. And the argument of the classics is that it's the many who is rapacious, vicious. And the question is, who's the rapacious element? See, the Aristotelian conception is the poor is the rapacious one. And there's some truth to this. The poor themselves, without nothing, are kind of rapacious. But Aristotle also says in book 11 of the Prince that it's both the rich and the poor. The rich and the poor are both problematic. The rich they're both rapacious in their certain ways. The arrogance, the poor are rapacious from their lack, their hunger, their nothingness, their desperate condition drives them. It's whereas the wealthy, their status and their arrogance leads them to do it. And the argument is that what is worse? That the arrogance, or the desperation, or those. This can be more vicious. This can because of the vast numbers, this can be more destructive than this. But this is as much as bad as that in that sense, for Aristotle's account. And Machiavelli seems to suggest that yes, that the people themselves, they just want to be left alone. As long as you leave them alone, they have, and they're able to acquire. Remember, all the way back, the desire to acquire is a universal human thing, right? As long as people are able to acquire, and they're able to get things, and they're able to enjoy the things that they acquire, then they'll be satisfied. The many will be. The great will not. They want the thing that they want to acquire. In other words, what do the many want to require? The many want to require food, sustenance, survive, living, comfort. The great want to charge. What do they want to achieve? The great want to achieve great things. Their ambition drives them to desire greater things that which require the sacrifice or the action of others, right? To accomplish that. So, for the end of the people is more honest than that of the great, the latter wanting to oppress, the former not to be oppressed. Moreover, with the people as enemies, a prince is never able to assure himself of them, because they are many. Okay, this is the danger. He now takes that. Remember, he talks about the fear of, in other words, the class. He Machiavelli is kind of a judicial, like the judo special, the judo fighter. He notices the classical argument is that the many is many, and therefore this is the, well. He's going to say, well, but that's going to make it difficult for you to rule, and that you're not going to. A prince is never going to assure himself if they're going to be the enemy of the many, because their manyness will make it difficult for him. Okay, so he's, in other words, of their many, and he is able to assure himself of the great because they are few. In other words, their fewness makes it easy to assure himself of them, because he can make that idea. The worst that a prince can expect from the people who are his enemies is to be abandoned by them. So, what is the worst? In other words, it's going to be difficult to, the people is going to be. In other words, in other words, the worst they can do is what of a people. The worst that a prince can expect from a people who are his enemies is to be abandoned by them. Which with the great as his enemies, he must not only fear being abandoned, he also fears their coming against him. For they have more foresight, they are more astute, and they always take steps to save themselves in time. And they seek the gratitude of the one they hope might win. In other words, they will seek the gratitude of those who they will side on who's the winner. In that sense, this is the difference. The great are going to know who's going to be the winner, and they're going to pick that side. The prince is also necessitated to live always with the same people, but he can do very well without the same great ones, because he can make and unmake them every day. He can take away and give at his despoil their reputation. Very important moment. The prince, in other words, they don't have to. He's stuck with the people. He's stuck with the people. He has to live with the people. He doesn't have to live with the great. Remember, they're few. The many are, you can't deal with them. The many are many. It's going to be hard to get rid of them and change them. The few are few. He can get rid of them. They're dangerous. They're more dangerous because they're smarter. They're capable of they're more astute. They're more able to save themselves in time. Right? All those things he just said up here. But they're few, and he can make them and unmake them. He can, in other words, he can make them. Because he does not have to do with the same great ones, because he can make and unmake them every day. Take away and give at his disposal their reputation, destroy their reputation. So this is interesting. This is interesting. This is the great response against someone who talks about elite theory. The nature of elites are that, yes, the elites are necessary. Elites are powerful. Elites are things, and you need elites, but they can be made or unmade. And that the prince who is an elite from his power can make or unmake them. And he makes and take away and give them their reputation, at his disposal their reputation, right? And in order better to clarify this part, now he's going to clarify this part. I say that one ought to consider consider the great principally in two modes. So to clarify this problem here, this principal point about the great, I say one could consider the great principally in two modes. They either govern themselves in their proceedings in such a mode that they are wholly obliged to your fortune, or they do not. So therefore, do they owe you everything? Are they yours, or they do not. Now, this is the second person familiar, so personal you. There was wholly obliged to you, my good buddy, or they're not. So that's the mode. There are two modes. They're obligated to your fortune, your status, your condition, your well-being, or they're not. Those who are so obligated, who are not rapacious, ought to be honored and loved. And those who are not obliged have to be examined in two modes. In other words, okay, remember, those who are rapacious, in other words, the problem with the rapacious. What about the people who are in your side but are rapacious? They do you damage. Don't respect them. Don't, in other words, that they are not to be honored or loved. The ones who are great, are, are, are who are obligated to you but are not rapacious, they ought to be honored and loved. But those who are not obligated to you have to be examined in two modes. Because those who are not obligated to you don't owe themselves to you, not looking for your fortune, don't care about, you're not tied, their fortune is not tied to your fortune and your situation, your condition. If they, these people should be examined two modes. One, if they keep to themselves from you because they are pusillanimous, that means small, or lack, and a natural lack of spirit, right? This is great. Smallness of soul, pusillanimous, right? Smallness of soul. If they have a smallness of soul, what do you do? Smallness of soul. Um, uh, Spirit, this, but then the next part, spirit, and the natural lack of spirit, right? And look at this, the question of spirit, right? He talks about the epistatecatory. Then you should have okay, have them serve you. In other words, if they're small souls and lack spirit, they should serve you, especially those who are of good counsel. Because in prosperity they bring you honor. And adversity, and in adversity you need not fear them. In other words, they're small and soul, they don't lack spirit. They're not going to do it. As long as they have good, only if they have good counsel, especially if those have good counsel. Because if they have good counsel, you use them, you honor, they serve you, especially if they have good counsel. Because if they, this is the problem, they need to be competent. They have to be good counsel and they have to be competent. Incompetent people serving you doesn't benefit you. They must be competent and they must have good judgment. But they must be small. They must be small souled, or not of great spirit, right? Small spirit. Because in prosperity they bring you honor, and adversity do not fear them, right? But if they do not oblige themselves out of art and because of ambition, it is a sign that they are thinking more of themselves than you. And it is these whom a prince should watch and fear, as if they were discover enemies, because they will always in adversity help to ruin him. So these are the ones who what? Be careful. Those who do not oblige themselves. But if they do not oblige themselves out of art and ambition, in other words, if they do not oblige themselves out of art and ambition, it is a sign that they're thinking more of themselves. In other words, they're not obliging themselves. Those who do not oblige themselves out of art and ambition do not obligate themselves to you, themselves out of art or ambition. It is a sign that they're thinking more of themselves, and that these are the ones the prince should watch and fear. One who becomes a prince by means of the favor of the people ought, therefore to keep them his friends. This is made easy for they for this is made easy for him, for they ask him only they not be oppressed. Ask him only that they not be oppressed. But one who becomes a prince with the favor of the great against the people ought above all things to gain the people to himself, which is easily done when he undertakes their protection. So, but remember, there's something he said that, in other words, earlier in the year, he's going to say something here now. He says what? He says that it's going to be easy to do this. Above all, to gain people to himself, which is done easily when he undertakes their protection. And since men, when good comes from the one whom they believe they will have evil, they are more obligated to their benefactor. The people are immediately more well disposed to him than if he had been conducted to the Principate with his own favor. Now, this sentence has two problems. Well, one of them is a positive one. Remember what Cesare Borgia did to Marco di Orco and how the people became satisfied and stupefied by them. Because they satisfied, they got rid of the person. They don't blame him. In other words, the evils done by Marco di Orco was that they that benefited Cesare, bringing order, which benefits the society, but people were angry at it. They were kind of they were angry at the viciousness of this, what he did, right? So what he needed to do is, get rid of them. The left him that I killed that guy, found dead, and therefore the people were satisfied and stupefied, right? That image of that. But then that's one understanding of it. The other understanding is, remember when Cesare himself makes the mistake of making Julius the Pope, right? Who's an enemy. He was someone who harmed him. So the difference is why is the mistake is the difference between the great and the poor. The great person is they will never forgive someone they've harmed, and just because they understand that if you make them great, that you did something to make them great, they know that you did that, and therefore they're resentful. They'll always hunt you down. They'll never forgive you for that sense. You make someone great, they will always think, well, you made me great. Okay, they fear you. They fear the people who they fear the people who make them great, because if they can make you great, they can make you perhaps unmake you. The also danger is he says that a line that people never forgive. They don't forgive. The great don't forgive. Is it that the many do forgive? Is that maybe the ignorance of the vulgar, because they only care about they're not really cared about their ambition. They're compared about the small things. The people are, in other words, they're less ambition. They don't have pride per se, or they do. It's more limited in that sense. They don't have the great ambition. Where the great person has a greater sense of ego, in that sense, and a greater sense of their self and the obligations of that. So this is why the danger here is and since men come good, in other words, since men, when good comes from the one they perceive they will get evil, they're more obliged to them, right? The people are immediately more disposed to him as though they've been conducted by the prince by themselves. And the prince, they gained the people in many modes, but because these modes vary according to the subject, a certain rule cannot be given, and they will not be, and they will therefore be admitted. He's not going to. I'm not going to go into the many modes. In other words, a prince can gain the people many modes, and because these modes vary according to the subject, there's no one rule cannot be given. A certain simple rule cannot be given. Therefore, you should. In other words, and therefore, they will be admitted. All right. Okay. In other words, he's not going to give a general rule here. He says, but you should make the people. You should always try the people. The great put you in power, then make the people your friend. immediately, because yes, they didn't come in power with you, and because you help them now, they will think, oh, I didn't expect you to help me. Again, this is what can say, but why wouldn't they think, well, you've harmed me, you helped me before? In other words, is that's why I think we have to think about that. The question is of the people and their character. Is there a difference between the great and the people in that sense? And I think it is, maybe because out of the fear. Back to book 11 of Politics 4 from Aristotle. I think the difference is the people's necessity versus the nobles' greatness, their nobility and their status and their sense of supremacy, their sense of ego and their sense of uh, entitlement, arrogance leads them to the difference between the two. Um, so let's go continue. He says, I shall continue only that it is necessary for a prince to have the people friendly. Otherwise, an adversity, he does not have a remedy. In other words, he has no remedy. If the people are in other words, they're not really as much of a threat, but there's no remedy for the people. Nabis, the prince of the Spartans, sustained the siege of the whole of Greece, and one of the most victorious of Roman armies, and defended his fatherland and his state against them. When the danger appeared, one thing alone sufficed. He assured himself of the few, that he assured himself of the few. If he had the people as his enemies, this would not have been enough. So in other words, he basically, one thing alone, he dealt with the few. He assured himself of the few, like he made sure that the few could not threaten him, and that if the people had been his enemies, this would not have been enough. And let no one contradict my opinion with the trite proverb that he who founds on the people founds on mud. For that is true if a private citizen lays his foundation there and gives himself to be understood that the people will rescue him if he's opposed by enemies or by the magistrates. In this case, as one could find himself deceived, as were the Gracchi in Rome and Messer Giorgio Scarsi in Florence. In other words, these two examples, the Gracchi, the famous case of the Gracchi in Rome, Tiberius and Gaius, right, ought to reform the Roman constitution by increasing popular and knightly power against the senatorial nobility. Tiberius was murdered by the senatorial gangs in 133. Gaius, by one of his slaves, killed him in 121 to avoid being taken by his enemies. The Gracchi, according to Machiavelli, were imprudent in seeking radically to restore the republican ways when evil ways had become habitual. Right, that's the mistake. The evil ways became habitual. Therefore, you can't just do. Now, Giorgio Scarli was one of the heads of the popular rebellion in Florence, with which the tumult of Campi 1378. The Campi were unincorporated laborers in the wool industry and formed the most numerous and powerful of Asia of the minor arts, that is, of the trades, which employed the lowest people, the plebeians, as Machiavelli called them. The popular government was established, an oligarchic party, the Glef, were either oppressed and exiled. Starcy, together with some others, proved, however, to be too democratic or plebeian, given the populist government, that he was beheaded. He was even for the popular government, and he was beheaded. It was too democratic, too radical. So, in other words, he gives an example of them. Um, um, but a prince who founds on the people, who is able to command. In other words, he's not relying on them to do that, but they're able to command, and is a man of heart, is not dismayed in adversity. In other words, he has heart and he's able to do it. And he's not dismayed in adversity. And he does not lack other preparations. Remember, the other preparation is important here. And if with his mind and his orders he animates the whole, there's this latter, in other words, people. In other words, he's able to command. In other words, he frowns on the people, but he's able to command. He has heart. He's not dismayed by his adversity, and he's not lacked other. Does not lack other preparation. He's prepared. He made the preparations. In the times, other times, he's prepared for the situation. He's not without the means, and with his mind and his orders, he animates. He animates the whole. He will never find himself deceived by the people, by them, and he will see that he has laid for himself good foundation. In other words, he has done these other preparations. His mind and his orders, he animates the whole, but he's done other preparations. He's made the preparation, and he's laid for himself that he will see that he's laid good foundations. Last paragraph now. Usually these principates are put in danger when they are in transition from the civil order to the absolute one. In other words, that this is the danger of this: the civil order versus the absolute one. And he says, what is that? This is 7. Note, the civil order is the one which there is liberty. Liberty was implied above. Is the city is to be found in the city. Chapter 5, right? Go back to all the way to chapter 5, the free city, the freest. Remember, Odie said that about the nature of the city and liberty. In other words, okay, the civil order, the transition from a civil order to an absolute one. For such princes, either take command themselves or appoint magistrates. In the latter case, their place is weaker and more dangerous because they are wholly dependent on the will of those citizens who appointed magistrates. For these, especially in diverse times, can with great felicity take away the state, either by opposition or disobedience. Right, that's the danger of magistrates. Right, that the people appointed them, they can do that. These are dangerous. And a prince cannot, in the midst of danger, take absolute authority in time, because the citizens and the subjects who usually obey the magistrates are not, in these shoals, going to obey him, and there will always in dubious time be a dearth of those whom you can trust. So therefore, it can't wait. In other words, you can't do this in time of war crisis. The prince cannot, in the midst of dangers, take absolute authority in time. Why? Because the citizens and subjects who usually obey the magistrates are not, in these shows, going to obey him. Right? They obey the magistrates. And there will always be, in dubious times, a dearth of those whom he can trust. For such a prince cannot found himself on what he sees in quiet times, when citizens have need of a state. They can't trust the quiet times. In other words, for a prince cannot found himself on what he sees in quiet times, when the citizens have need of the state. For then everyone runs, everyone promises, everyone wants to die for him, when death is far off. But an adverse time, when the state has need of citizens, then few of them are to be found. Okay, right? At times, in other words, when it's quiet, they'll promise everything. They'll do that. But when the crisis is available and death is not far off, there's going to be few of them that will be found. And so much more is this experience dangerous, since one cannot have it more than once. You cannot keep on doing this situation where you have the danger and even do that. Therefore, a wise prince ought to think of a mode whereby his citizens always and in every quality of time have need of the state and of him, and they will always be faithful to him. In other words, you have to make them wholly dependent upon you. They have to be, and they will be faithful to you. Therefore, a wise prince ought to think of a mode by which his citizens always and in every quality of time will have need of the state and of him. Okay, there's not only quiet times, but also all times that need him and the state and him. And they will always, let's be faithful to him. And this is how he ends it. You have to come up with a new mode by which citizens always in every quality of time have need for him. That's the new. This is the order, that the mode that needs to be done. Now, he doesn't specify that. This is again. This is the. You have to think about this. This is the thinking that the civic principate must. A principate must. How does he get the people always need him, need the state and him, in control of the state, not turning to others, right? Okay, or the magistrates. In other words, he needs them. In other words, he can't just take power to exercise power here. He must always do so that everything is designed that he controls the loyalty, and they see they need him. They need him. Okay, let's stop here. If you like any comments or questions you have about this chapter, please put it below, and when I see them, I'll respond to them. If you like this chapter, please hit the like button because it helps the algorithm. Hit the thumbs up. Um, um, it helps. If you liked it, please share share this on social media, or share it to your friends. Share it far and wide. Again, this also helps the algorithm and these things get more attention. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. Encourage others to come check the subscription. If you're new to the channel, check out the other stuff we've done. Check the previous videos up there, on both on this theme, the earlier videos, but also other playlists we have on these topics that we cover. But subscribe helps grow the algorithm, grow the channel. We're getting near the magic number. Those of you, because maybe some people come late after the fact, but we'll hope to get the party when we get that magic number. Another thing we need to do is, if you didn't like it, you can always thumbs down, but say why in the comments, and that way people can learn and benefit from your criticism, or you can correct me, and that's right. You can follow me on social media. Links are below. You want to know more about me as a scholar and a researcher, and check out my scholarship and things like this. You can check it out below the academic social media links, below the social media links. And then, or if you want to help me to do what I do, you want to contribute in that sense, you can contribute through StrideStar or Patreon. The URLs listed below to each of those. This way it can help, because this does cost to do things, and it help defer costs in that sense. Another way you can do so is by buying one of my books. People they do so, but it helps in that sense. You can check out the books. I list the books that are currently available. You can check them out through your local order them through your local bookstore, of course, or order them on online distributors like Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Libris, and things like that. Or you can order it directly through publishers. Well, that's it. We'll turn next to chapter 10 of The Prince, and we'll see you there soon. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.